Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Hannah. Welcome to my home in Portland, Oregon. I'm excited to show you around.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, I'm Hannah Eleanore, and welcome to my 100-year-old Craftsman home in Portland, Oregon. We've lived in this home for almost 4 years. We moved to Portland from Austin, Texas right after the pandemic in 2021 and purchased this house right away. We needed to completely renovate the kitchen and all of the bathrooms, so that's what we started doing, and we lived through a lot of that renovation. When we would visit my husband's family here, I always loved driving through this neighborhood, walking through the neighborhood, admiring the homes, and when it was time to move back, we started looking, and we didn't initially anticipate buying a home in this historic neighborhood, but when we saw that this one was available, it had great bones and just needed some help, we felt like it was the perfect spot for us. I'm from Mississippi. I'm from the Deep South, born and raised in Mississippi. I went to college at a small liberal arts school in Tennessee, so I spent the majority of my early life in the South, really influenced by the aesthetic of Southern design, being surrounded by people who love old things, antiques, this appreciation for old things, and your home being collected and layered over time is a really defining trait of Southern design, or at least the Southern design that I grew up around. And so that has really informed my style now as an adult. Welcome to my living room. When we first bought this home, the living room is really long and narrow, and I knew that we needed the sofa opposite the fireplace, and I've always wanted a big built-in bookshelf behind my sofa. I've seen this in other homes, in a lot of like English cottages, and I knew that that would be perfect in this space. So we actually had the bookshelf added, and then the other piece in this room that really needed some love was the fireplace. It had very 80s sort of beach tile around the fireplace, which was interesting. So what we did was added some additional brick here to complement the brick that was already on the sides of the fireplace, and painted the entire thing. I don't love a TV above a fireplace, but our family loves to pile up on the sofa together and watch movies, and it's just what felt practical for our space. So I knew I wanted the fireplace and the wall here to be dark so that the TV would just blend in and not stand out as a prominent design feature of the room. I'll probably sound a bit like a broken record throughout the tour because everything in my home is from an estate sale, from an antique store, inherited from someone in my family. But these chairs were actually a Facebook marketplace find. When we moved away from Austin, we sold almost all of our furniture to the buyers of our last house. So we were starting from scratch when we moved to Portland. And right when we moved here, before we even bought this house, I found these chairs on Facebook marketplace, and I knew I wanted to do something really funky with them. Pink. I did have this pink zebra print in mind, and there's this incredible fabric store here in Portland called Mill End Fabrics, and I picked up this fabric there, snagged the chairs off of Facebook Marketplace, and immediately had them reupholstered. They were one of the first pieces that we had when we moved into the home because we were really starting from scratch. I do like to keep the mantle pretty minimalistic because I don't want to draw a lot of attention necessarily to this aspect of the room. I love old vases that sort of like remind you of something that would be in your grandmother's house. This is from an estate sale, and I have a lot of like vintage vessels and vases throughout the home. This is one of my favorite pieces. I got this at Round Top in Texas, and for any antique or design lovers, they probably know Round Top because it's just such a destination. So things are either from estate sales, antique stores, or collected from places like Round Top. On this side of the living room, we obviously have our big built-in bookshelf and our big sofa that holds our whole family. We actually had the same sofa in Austin, and we liked it so much, and it was so cozy for our family to pile up on together that we repurchased the same sofa. It's a Pottery Barn sofa. The navy is just a performance navy. I had this vision of reupholstering it with something really bold and colorful, and I still may, but for now it works well in the space. I always need some animal print in my home because growing up in the South, lots of Southern design influences throughout my home. There's always going to be an element of animal print somewhere in the space. It just reminds me of the way my mom had our home decorated and all of her friends. There was always animal print in the space. So I knew I wanted to have a nice long lumbar pillow, not too cluttered with too many throw pillows, but just something that gave a nod to sort of Southern design aesthetic with the animal print. When adding this bookshelf to the room, I knew I wanted to fill it up with beautiful vintage antique books. The lower level books kind of behind the sofa are the paperback books that we read, and the more beautiful, colorful books are ones that I have collected from estate sales and antique stores over the years. And I find that estate sales are really just one of the best places to gather really interesting books, design books especially. I have so many vintage design coffee table books that I've gotten from estate sales, really amazing old Martha Stewart books and art books that I cherish and get a lot of design inspiration from. My very favorite book doesn't have the paper cover on it anymore because kids, but this is called One Man's Folly. One Man's Folly features the exceptional houses of Furlow Gatewood, and he is a Southern designer. He was a Southern designer in Georgia. He had a family compound in Georgia where he designed and decorated several different homes on the property. He was an antique collector and designer. His spaces were just otherworldly. In addition to all of the books that I have filling up the shelves, I have lots of little Easter eggs, little design elements that I've collected. Some of my favorite things that I've ever thrifted or gotten at estate sales, like the zebra, and the funky little vases at the very top that are hand painted are some of my favorites. I also really love collecting statues and busts. When I find one that really speaks to me, even if it's not in a color that works for my space, you can just paint these statues. So I really like having statues and funky little sculptures sprinkled throughout my home. Our coffee table is more of a mid-century bench, as you can see, and we do move it around a lot. It's one of our vintage finds from Austin. It's very durable, and it's taken quite the beating, and it still looks fantastic. In the back two corners of the living room, I have these two sketches that I absolutely love. I got them at an estate sale at the home of the artist, and he had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sketches, figure drawings that he had worked on over the years. These are dated 1985. I think that one might be 1987. And he had just stacks and stacks and stacks of drawings that he had done over his lifetime. There's this really incredible thrift store here in Portland called Community Warehouse, and it's actually a nonprofit. A lot of the things that are donated go to refugees and people who need support furnishing their home. One of the fundraising efforts for this nonprofit is a local thrift store. It happens to be right down the street from my home, and there are the most incredible pieces that you can find. They're really, really high quality art and furniture. They're only open a few days a week, and it's completely volunteer run, but if you have a chance to stop by, you can find some of the best antiques and art. And this piece with the beautiful gold leafing and the green fabric mat, it's just one of my favorites. And a lot of the homes that I grew up in the South had a formal foyer. This house doesn't have a formal foyer. It opens directly into the living room. So that can pose a challenge, but I saw it as an opportunity to just create this little miniature foyer right here by the front door with an antique table that we actually got at a flea market in Los Angeles. It does expand, and we can add it to our dining room when we're having big dinner parties where we need to have more seating, which we do often. It's just the perfect little drop zone here. I also love collecting antique lamps and then adding some sort of contrasting shade. This shade, I think the shade's from Ballard Design, and then the lamp is an antique, and I just like I like the mix and match look. This piece is another favorite find from an estate sale. I always recommend, if you can find an estate sale at the home of an artist, do not skip those, because that's where you're gonna find some of the most incredible pieces. They had all of their artwork out in the dining room, some sculptural pieces as well as paintings. I love the kind of surreal aspect of like the chair, the proportions of the chairs are really funky and kind of off, and I really liked that. So I knew that I wanted to frame it. They were not framed. A lot of the art that I get at estate sales is not framed, so then I will get to make choices about how I want it matted and how I want it framed. I think that a mirror in an entryway is an absolute necessity, and I love this giant mirror. It's extremely heavy. It fit perfectly in this space for, again, my sort of makeshift foyer. In these old Craftsman homes, there's not a lot of closet space, and in Portland in the winter, you need a place to store your jackets, so I knew right away that I had to find a coat tree. It's one of the first things that I went out and looked for at antique stores. There's this really incredible town called Aurora, Oregon. It's about an hour outside of Portland, and it has just rows and rows of antique shops in these beautiful old homes. It's quite the destination, and I highly recommend it if you're in the area and you like to antique. I went there to source some things for the home when we moved here. I knew I needed a coat tree because you have to have a place to hang your coats in Portland. And when it's time for spring and summer, then you just kind of get to put your pretty things on there, like your hats and your baskets. When we were starting on the renovation for this home, I definitely had a vision on the colors I wanted to bring into the space. And there's a lot of color in the rest of the home, and I knew that I wanted something neutral in the living room so that the books and the art and the pillows could really stand out. So the color on the walls in our living room is Schoolhouse White by Farrow & Ball. I have used this neutral in other parts of the home as well, but it's just a great base. As you'll see as we move into the dining room, there's a lot of color. So I like having this sort of this putty white. It's not a true white. It's neutral, but it's not stark, and it just fits an old Craftsman house really, really well. Coming from Austin, Texas, we were in a ranch style house there, and I loved our home in Austin. It was adorable, but it was very, very different than these historic old Craftsman homes. So when we moved to Portland and we decided to buy and tackle this house as our project, my favorite thing about Craftsman homes is the millwork and the woodwork throughout the home, and I immediately fell in love with that. I knew that whether it was wallpaper or funky color that we were adding to the space, the millwork would kind of be the star of each room. That's something that I just really love about Craftsman homes, is the attention to detail. The kitchen had been remodeled probably in the 90s, so it was not the original kitchen. We didn't feel attached to it because it didn't feel necessarily original or authentic to the house. The bathrooms had also been redone maybe in the 90s or early 2000s in a way that, again, did not necessarily reflect the original style of the house and didn't reflect our personal aesthetic. So we knew we needed to gut the bathrooms and give the kitchen a pretty major overhaul. And besides the kitchen and the bathrooms, we really focused on paint and wallpaper throughout the home to make it feel more like our own space. Now we can head from the living room into our dining room. We found this Craftsman house really unique because it has a big open dining room. The flow of this home is really open, which I liked a lot because a lot of Craftsman houses have small rooms. Being from the South, I love to host, I love to have dinner parties, and we were excited to be moving closer to my husband's family. We knew we'd be throwing a lot of dinner parties, having people over, so we were very excited about the size of this room. This table is something else that I sourced right away when we moved here. It's from Cherished. I knew I wanted a long farmhouse style table. This one's really narrow, which is why I picked it, because I didn't want something that took up too much space, but still seats a lot of people. When the table was delivered, there was this really glossy top to it, almost like something that would be in a pizza parlor, that I was not anticipating when I found it on Cherished. So I actually refinished the top of the table myself, chipped away at that sort of glossy veneer, and then refinished it, and we love it so much more now. I really like to collect china and vintage glassware so that we can make just like casual dinner parties, really fancy for no reason at all. We'll have Friday night pizza night and eat on our best china or drink out of vintage glassware just for fun. Another thing that I've gotten really into since moving to Portland is eating by candlelight, because it can be very gloomy and very rainy so much of the year that I've found that it's very important to create special little rituals. And so even when we're just having a normal weekday dinner, we'll light candles and pour a glass of wine and try and make dinner special. And I find that having beautiful drinkware and vintage china can just help elevate the whole evening, even if you're just having takeout. This is one of my favorite sets that I have. There's gold leafing behind the flowers, and I actually won this set at auction. I'm really big on color, and so the fact that this has the metallic gold leaf with lots of color, it just spoke to me. I knew I had to have it, and I was so lucky and glad that I was able to snag it at auction. This cabinet is actually antique. It was my grandmother's. It's one of the pieces that we did bring up here. My parents have several of these library cabinets in my dad's office. They're great for books, but I've actually turned mine into a storage for all of our drinkware and kind of created our little bar. You can see I have a ton of these mint julep cups. I have these sprinkled throughout the house, even in our medicine cabinet in the bathroom. I have toothbrushes in these cups. These cups were given to me every year by my godmother on my birthday, and so I have a lot of mint julep cups. They're great for cocktails, but they're also great for flowers and vases and just holding anything throughout the home. And so I love my mint julep cup collection. I was an art history major in school, and I studied fine art when I was studying abroad in the south of France. And so while I don't get to paint a ton now, during the pandemic, I got really into it. I got back into painting during the pandemic. And so I painted myself. I have painted all of my family members. Some of the pieces are out and about. Some of them are stashed away. I have a little art studio set up in the basement. I don't paint as much as I'd like, but I hope to get back into it one day. I have a ton of blue and white throughout the home just because I love that color combination. And this is a fabric that I found at the fabric store here in Portland, Millen Fabrics. That's so huge. It's such a huge, incredible fabric store. When I saw this fabric, I knew it would be perfect for custom drapery because it has so much body and it has a nice sheen and an interesting pattern. I wanted to have sort of a formal element to the drapes in the dining room. I have a lot of quirky antiques and art mixed in throughout the room, and so I like having sort of formal elements mixed with the less formal. This dining room has actually been 3 different colors since we moved in. I'm a very big proponent on if a color is not sitting right with you, you don't have, it's okay to repaint. And I put a lot of thought into the color palette of this space when we were designing it, and sometimes what you think is going to be perfect in a space doesn't work out, whether it's lighting or whether it's the way the colors flow throughout the space. So I had a little bit of trial and error in finding the right color, but when we painted it this color, I knew instantly that this was the right one. It's a bit of a terracotta, sort of like orangey color. This dining room doesn't get great light, and so I've found that this color is very forgiving, whether it's a bright day or a gloomy day. It felt perfect. Once we got it on the walls, it felt perfect. And the other 2 colors, while I love them and hope to use them one day in the future, they weren't right, and I'm glad that I kept going and experimenting until we got the right color. We didn't initially have these sconces here. These were actually in an upstairs bathroom. And when we painted the room this color, I knew I wanted to bring these down because they contrast. They're sort of in the same family, but they're a little contrasting. These sconces are from New Orleans. They're from a brand called Sazerac Stitches. I have a lot of antiques and I have a lot of old things in our home, and I knew that where I could bring in a little bit of whimsy and sort of modern elements, I wanted to. So I tried to do that with lighting in some of the rooms, and I think that it just provides a nice balance to a lot of the old things that I have throughout the space. The other thing I'll call out here is we added this sort of powder, like smoky blue on the millwork here. I love these doors. I love the French doors in this old Craftsman home, and I thought making them blue just made them stand out a little bit more and allowed us to kind of appreciate and celebrate them. I love the blue and the terracotta together, and I think it just works perfectly. Much like the modern sconces on the wall, I did want to add a bit of a modern touch with the chandelier here. My husband's very tall and he will hit his head, so I didn't want it to take up too much space. I wanted it just to offer a little bit of a modern touch, again, to kind of balance out all of the different old pieces that I have in the space. I personally have a very eclectic style. When it comes to design, especially Southern design, I think there's a spectrum. There's one end, you have really, really formal design where everything is just perfect and polished, and I definitely fall on the more eclectic end of the spectrum where I'm not afraid to mix and match and clash and put things together that don't go together perfectly. And I think that would be my tip, is don't be afraid of putting things together that do not go together, and if it looks bad, that's okay. You can experiment and you can swap things out. I have a couple different sets of antique silverware, and I'll mix those together without giving it a second thought. I don't need all my silverware to match. For Thanksgiving, I like to bring out a couple different sets of china because we'll have a lot of people over, and so you'll see different plates at different place settings. I think that there's ways to bring cohesion, whether that's through your napkin rings and your napkins, or maybe your drinkware. It's okay to have plates that don't match or silverware that doesn't match because it just adds to the character of the entire tablescape. Another of my favorite things to do at estate sales or antique stores is buy empty frames. There's so much that you can do. I have painted a ton of art to put in existing frames, or I have sourced art to put in frames that I love, but I also will turn them into mirrors. I found this frame in Austin, Texas. It was not gold leafed. I added the gold leaf myself, and I took it to a glass shop and had them add the mirror. All of a sudden you have this huge statement mirror. I always highly recommend buying the empty frames. This is a piece that was in my bedroom growing up, but the other pieces are just collected from antique shops and thrift stores and estate sales over the years. I love finding quirky statues at antique stores or estate sales and finding ways to incorporate them in the space, especially ones that are kind of like odd. If there's something that's a little bit odd, I like that. And I want it not to be like this perfect, beautiful, like Roman statue. I like, who is this strange old man or strange old lady? I also like kind of bringing out things from your closet and just finding a way to stage them. This necklace, this hat that I got in Texas, and then all of a sudden you have just like this little moment that's a little bit unexpected, but also creates this kind of cool focal point you wouldn't necessarily expect on a dining room credenza. This is a mid-century credenza that we sourced in Austin, Texas. There's lots of scratches on the top, but I love that. I love when a piece has scratches and character. These are the original knobs on the credenza, so we didn't want to change anything about it when we found this piece. I keep my china in here. I keep candles in here that we use for our dinners. This pair of lamps, I can't remember where I got them, but I do know that they are not old, they're new. And the lampshades are from Ballard Design. So I think this is a great example of like, not everything has to be sourced from an estate sale, not everything has to be found in an antique store. You can incorporate like funky new pieces as well, just to create that high-low balance. I'm not a stickler for symmetry. I definitely play around with this setup a lot, and it's not always quite so symmetrical, but I do think that there's something nice about having the balance in the space. Now we'll head to the kitchen. I have so many different favorite parts of my home because I put a lot of thought and detail into the space as we were designing it. While I could say the bookcase or the wallpaper in the bathroom are favorites, our kitchen is where our family spends the majority of our time. Our kitchen gets really beautiful natural light. We even pull our upholstered armchairs into the kitchen, especially in the summer. We open all the windows in the kitchen. We have wine and cheese in there in the evenings. It's just where we all as a family kind of pile up in the evenings. So the kitchen is probably my favorite part of the home. Welcome to the kitchen. We spend a ton of time in this space as a family. It gets the best natural light in the home. In the summertime, we can open all the windows in here and kind of have this indoor-outdoor living space with my son playing in the backyard, coming in and out. When we bought the home, this is one of the rooms that did need a lot of work. There was a giant island here that took up most of the footprint of the room. I knew I wanted to remove the island, and I was thinking about replacing it with a big farm table, but then when we took the island out and we saw how functional this big open floor space was, my son will just do puzzles on the floor and bring his trucks in here, so we left it open. The walls in this space are schoolhouse white, just like the living room, and I knew that I wanted to do a sage on the cabinets. This was when I was picking the cabinet color. It was several years ago, and sage cabinets were having quite the moment. I still love this color. I'm really I'm just really, really happy with how the kitchen turned out because it's just a very peaceful place. We have a lot of bright color and wallpaper in other rooms of the house, and I just think that this one is the colors in the kitchen are very calming for me. It's a really comfortable space for us to lounge in the evenings while we're unwinding, whether it's after work and school or in the summertime when we have family in town visiting, because Portland summers are just stunningly beautiful. Growing up in Mississippi, we had a family friend in town who would throw these beautiful Christmas Eve parties. We spent every Christmas Eve with these friends who are more like family every single year. And in her kitchen, she had a wall full of oyster plates. And it's just such a fond memory for me. And I loved her collection so much that I've slowly started collecting oyster plates of my own, and I've got a couple above the sink. I'm gonna keep gathering them and hanging them on the wall. That's definitely an influence from my childhood. I think so fondly of that home and those parties that we went to, and I'm excited to have my own collection. This is a ceramic piece that I actually got at a thrift store, and I think you can find some of the best pottery at thrift stores. I always recommend picking pieces up, looking at the bottom. A lot of times they'll be dated or signed. You can find some of the most funky, like school projects or amateur pottery, and I think that that adds so much to a home when you can collect pieces like that over time. Having a big silver collection to me is another piece of Southern design that I've definitely brought into my adult aesthetic in my home. My mom's family was from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and she often tells stories about how her grandparents, they had a really big, beautiful, formal home, and they always had their silver out on display. And so not just using it sort of in a functional way, but also letting it be part of the like aesthetic beauty of your space is something that I love. So I do try and leave, I leave pieces out like this to kind of be catch-alls, whether it's on a bedside table or a silver tray to gather wine glasses during a party. I think there's so many functional uses for silver that anytime I see a piece at an antique store, I'll grab it and add it to my collection. It does require a lot of polishing, but I think it's totally worth it. The table itself came from Aurora, Oregon. When we moved to Portland, I found out that there was this town about an hour away that is just known for antiques. And so we went with a U-Haul and sourced a lot of things. This table was one of the first things we got too. I've had it all over the house in our entryway, but it fits perfectly here. I got this piece at Goodwill, and it's one of my favorite thrift store finds I've ever had because it's this big, beautiful vessel with this incredible glaze, and it looks like something that you could get at Round Top, Texas. I have gotten vessels like this at Round Top, so when I saw this in Goodwill, I couldn't believe my eyes. Obviously, I snagged it right away, but I think that that's just such a testament to patience and just being curious and popping in thrift stores and keeping an open mind. You just never know when you're gonna find like a gem like that. I have a thing about chairs for sure. I probably have too many of them because I love an interesting chair, and I think you can always find a place for a fun chair. This chair we got at a flea market in Los Angeles, and I had it reupholstered with this sort of lime and taupe zebra print. I like having a nod to animal print throughout the home if I can, because it just reminds me of Southern design aesthetics. I have a very hard time passing up an interesting chair. Sally came from Los Angeles too. She's a SoCal girl. She came from the Pug Rescue in LA. Over here on this end of the kitchen, this leads into our backyard and into our basement, but I just have a few different pieces that I've collected over time. This is a mirror that we got at a flea market in Los Angeles. We collect and use these market baskets a lot. I feel like I always have 1,000 things in my arms and in my hands, and so I really love having beautiful baskets that I can just toss water bottles and purses and backpacks into and carry the whole thing out on an excursion. So we use our market baskets, but I like to store them up there because they're pretty. This print is by an artist in Los Angeles, and I can't remember the name, probably over 15 years ago, and I just love the aerial beach shots with people in the ocean. When I was planning out the design for this kitchen, I was loving like English cottage kitchens, and I knew I wanted a couple pendants that felt like they could be hanging in some sort of British kitchen. These are actually from Etsy, and I think Etsy's a really great source for lighting. This painting is by an artist called Walter Anderson, and if you're from the Deep South or you're from Mississippi, then you know exactly who Walter Anderson is. He was an artist on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and he's known for painting a lot of like flora and fauna of that area. Really, really interesting block prints and lots of different color varieties. There's a Walter Anderson museum on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and his prints are still sold, and local artists actually fill in the color and watercolor them. And I just love the pieces. This is one. I have several other Walter Anderson pieces throughout the home. Now I'll take y'all into the primary bedroom. You can see this appreciation for old collected things throughout my home with my collection of art, which so much of it is, almost all of it is vintage or from estate sales, or thrifted or from antique stores. If it's not, then it's art that I've painted or my mom has painted. All of my furniture, everything in my home is old. It's either from an antique store, it's from Facebook Marketplace and it's been reupholstered, it's from Cherish. Everything has a story behind it. I think that the mixing of patterns and the clashing of patterns is something that I've definitely pulled from my upbringing around Southern design as a child. I love having competing wallpapers or fabrics that are competing with a wallpaper print. So you'll see that throughout the space as well. I've shared this on my TikTok before, but my biggest recommendation when it comes to decorating your home is just to not rush into it. Collect things over time, be patient. I think when we try to get everything done in a space all at once or as quickly as possible, we lose some of the authenticity that the space can really have if you wait and you collect things over time. I love the collected and layered look. So that's my biggest recommendation, is just be patient, live with what you have, and gather things, collect things over time. Play with your space, redecorate your space with what you already have, move things around and experiment and get creative. And then my other tip is buy old things. Buy old things, don't be in a rush and go out and buy all new stuff. Be patient. If you're patient and you go to estate sales or you just check out Facebook Marketplace, you can find really incredible things that add personality and character to your home. And this is our primary bedroom. This is my favorite corner of our primary bedroom. This is my bedside table. I love using my julep cups for flowers. Our lamps were from an estate sale or an antique store. I've paired them with these velvet lampshades that are actually from Urban Outfitters. So again, it just goes to show, you know, don't be afraid to mix and match high and low. I just love these velvet shades. I have another silver bowl here that usually my husband's car keys are in. It's big, beautiful vessels from Round Top, Texas. So you saw the one that the one in the kitchen's from Goodwill. This one's from Round Top. It just goes to show you can find incredible things when you least expect it. This is another frame that I've collected and added a mirror to. So I just can't recommend picking up vintage frames enough, because you can always, if you don't have art to put in them, you can always add a mirror and add it to your dresser. The dresser was one of our first pieces, maybe the first piece that we got when we moved to Portland, when we did not have a stitch of furniture, the movers had not arrived, and we needed some place to put our clothes. And we got it off of Facebook Marketplace and just went and picked it up and took it to the apartment that we were staying at. And the apartment was very modern and brand new. And I kind of loved having this vintage dresser in our like stark modern apartment. So I think that you can really, like, you can mix pieces like this in all sorts of different aesthetic spaces. It doesn't just have to be an old Craftsman home. A lot of these pieces I've had in different style homes or apartments, and I think that they can work great in all sorts of spaces. The wall color is a pink color by Farrow & Ball. I can't remember the name, and it's honestly not my favorite. It's something that didn't really turn out exactly the way I wanted it to. I did find these velvet curtains that almost match the paint color perfectly. I like how the curtains and the wall color work together, which is the only reason that I'm hanging on to this wall color as long as I am. But I could see myself completely changing this room one day in the near future, so who knows. The headboard's custom made, as is this pillow. The fabric has this pattern that's both linen and velvet, and I loved it. I bought enough to have the headboard made and enough left over so that we can make a big lumbar pillow, because I wanted it to feel like a hotel room when we come in here. I do love this rug so much. This is one of the rugs that I got from my friend who deals antiques and vintage, and she finds the best pieces. So I was lucky enough to be able to buy this from her. And now I'll take y'all into the bathroom. And before we go into the bathroom, I want to show you the wallpaper in this hallway because I love it, and I intentionally picked a wallpaper that would complement but also contrast with the wallpaper in the bathroom, because I was really mindful that from different rooms in the house, you would have this line of sight through this hallway and into the bathroom. In these old Craftsman homes, when the bathroom is right off the central part of the house, you want your bathroom to be beautiful. I actually hung this wallpaper myself. This was my first time ever hanging wallpaper. It went pretty well. I don't know that I'll do that many other wallpaper projects in the future because it's very tedious. I'm proud that I taught myself to do it, but I probably won't do a lot of it in the future. This is our bathroom. What was in here previously was not original to the house, and it just wasn't doing the space any favors. So we knew that it all needed to be pulled out, and it's a tight, small space. So we had to work with what we had. We needed decent storage in the vanity. I wanted real marble in the shower and the countertop. It just feels like a luxury. It's nice to appreciate the stone, and as it gets wear and tear, I just love the patina on real stone. We did a marble herringbone on the floor as well. There's a full tub in this bathroom. While it is one of our primary bathrooms in the home, we keep it very simple and clean and minimalistic so that when a guest comes in, it feels like a guest bathroom. It feels like a powder bath, and it's not cluttered with toothbrushes and hairbrushes. That makes me appreciate it so much more too, because I love coming in here and just feeling like it's a really clean, peaceful, like elevated space. The color palette and the wallpaper choices for this bathroom was one of the first things I decided on when we were planning out the design for the home. This is Red Earth by Farrow & Ball with the Cole & Sons paper. Red Earth is a color that I had picked out for the space even before I knew where I was going to use it. And then when I decided on the Cole & Sons paper, the two just came together perfectly. I knew instantly that it was the right combo for this space. And then around the time that we were finalizing the design for this bathroom, I found this little antique piece of art. And again, both the birds that complement the birds in the wallpaper and the color just felt like it was the perfect piece to hang in the bathroom. And I don't know if it's a Southern thing or not, but having a little bit of artwork hanging like right above your toilet is just something I love so much. And it reminds me of so many of the homes that I loved growing up. Throughout the home, you'll see these fun Craftsman details like the privacy glass on this bathroom door and these original knobs. This is the first time that I've lived in a home where there's a window into the bathroom door, but it really does provide you with enough privacy, and it's just such a fun and special detail of this 100-year-old home. I love it. Now I'll show y'all my son's room. I've always loved design, specifically Southern design, and I've always had a deep love for social justice and politics. In Austin, Texas, I was in a social justice book club with women who are now beloved friends of mine. My dad has always been very, very into politics. He and my mom raised us in a very progressive way in the Deep South, and so politics has always been something that we've talked a lot about within our family, and I never really knew how to blend my love for antiques and decor and design with my interest in social justice and politics. It felt like two very different things, and it felt like if I was going to be sharing home decorating stuff on TikTok, it did not blend or match with politics. I was sharing a video of my home. There was pretty wallpaper in it. It was just B-roll. I kind of spontaneously decided to just put a caption out there that said something like, I love Southern design, I love wallpaper, I love decorating my house, and I'm also really into radical progressive politics. And to my surprise, that post just took off. And thousands of Southern women who also love antiques, who also love vintage cocktail glasses and decorating their homes, and who feel a bit isolated because of their progressive views in a potentially really conservative area, flocked to this post. And I started getting thousands and thousands of followers and thousands of people chiming in the comments and saying, I needed this. I feel the exact same way. I love pretty Southern things. I love hosting and dinner parties and book clubs and wine nights, and I also love social justice, and I also really believe in progressive politics and progressive policy. And all of a sudden, I found myself with this community online of, 30, 40, 50,000 people who felt the same way I did, who saw that there was a lane where we could mix our love of antiques and decor and wallpaper and dinner parties with conversations about social justice and progressive politics. Welcome to my son's room. Because in our household we have played musical beds so much over the years, he has a queen size bed, because if we end up in here or have to trade beds in the middle of the night, we wanted to be sure that we were comfortable in his room too. This map is one of my first vintage purchases ever. I found it on eBay right out of college. I was just getting into antiquing and it shipped to me in this long tube. I've had it in every home and every apartment I've ever been in, and now it's hanging over his bed. And it's just, I love the colors. I love how bright and vibrant it is. I think it makes a perfect piece over a little boy's bed. The pillow shams are also Etsy purchases over the years. This was very much the aesthetic of my home in Austin. I loved having these Killam pillows throughout the house. Now they're perfect on his bed with his stuffies. The wall color is in navy by Furrow and Ball, and I'm forgetting the name, but I love it. It's dark and it's rich. It was actually a color that I was considering for the primary bedroom, but I think it's great in here for him. This lamp is another one of my favorite combinations of a Ballard design lampshade with an antique lamp. That's actually an antique plant stand that I have set up as his bedside table because it's such a tight little squeeze over there. It was the perfect fit. There's this really cool store in Portland called Cargo, and it's got all kinds of imports from all over the world. And these masks, I saw these masks and I just thought that they would be perfect in terms of like artwork for a kid's room. And I purchased them, hung them on the walls. He absolutely loves them. And they really have seen better days. I kind of need to replace them because they've been taken off the walls and used and they're kind of chipped now, but they're paper mache masks. And I think that they're just really fun art for a kid's room. Through the journey of moving from the South to the Pacific Northwest and renovating a home and making it our own, I've really come to appreciate that home is about the people inside, the memories that you're making in your space, the dinner parties that you're having, the family and friends that come and stay with you. Whether that's in Mississippi or Portland, it's really about just making a space your own and making it work perfectly for your family. Okay, Homeworthy, thank you so much for coming, but I'm gonna have to let you go now. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.